So the comment that he leaves is that he doesn't want to play a big pot when out of position with 5-6 of hearts or with a suited connector, so he decides to limp in. I personally don't limp in very often before the flop, although I'm not going to immediately fault it and say that limping is a bad play. As I mentioned earlier, there are some benefits to it. However, one of the reasons why I would avoid limping, or let me try and articulate this, properly. The reason he gives is that he doesn't want to play a big pot with suited connectors out of position, therefore he limps in. That is not one of the reasons why I would look to limp. First of all, you're 300 big blinds deep, so raising to $3 or $4 and getting a couple callers doesn't really qualify as a big pot to me yet. And at the same time, there is about an hour's worth of footage that I had to go through to make this series, and I don't think PokerStud was 3-bet a single time. People just seem very hesitant to play back at everyone. You notice that most of the action in this video was a lot of checking and calling, and not so much betting and raising. So if I'm in your shoes, I'm not really going to be that worried about playing a big pot when I'm out of position with suited connectors. So regardless of how I feel about limping in, that is not one of the reasons why I would do it. I would rather say that I'm limping in because I want to get in cheap in a bad spot and just give myself a chance to make a big hand against what are likely to be some weaker players. Now on table number 1, our hero with pocket sixes ISOs the limp. This is a player that we've been targeting so far. ISO size looks good. Even larger, frankly, is fine. This guy hasn't folded yet, and even though you might want to keep the pot size manageable with pocket sixes, at the same time, if he's going to call whatever you throw at him, why not raise your prices? So we get an overcall from Captain Marb, who I'm assuming is a regular. He has a deeper stack, and his play has been kept in check so far. But I don't have too much to comment on his style of play. Now, on this board texture, pocket sixes very often will be the best hand here. This is a spot where I'm definitely in favor of continuation betting, not only because I want to protect my equity and take the pot down, but also because of the previous experience that we've had with the limp caller, and the fact that we saw him peel on the ace-6-6 rainbow board and fold the turn. We saw him check call with king-9 on a 10-8 X board. We saw him call 3 street with an underpair on a scary coordinated board. Clearly this player does not like to fold, so it seems like a pretty good spot to value bet what is, effectively second pair. I probably would opt for a smaller value bet on the flop, just hoping that Captain Marb folds, while trying to price in and encourage some calls from our weaker player at the table. So PokerStud ends up continuation betting for, I think, $7, which is, all in all, is a fine size. I might have opted for 8 or 9, but $7 is a fine size. The only real drawback to the size that I see or one of the drawbacks I see, is that it might encourage some bluff raises when Captain Marb interprets the small bet size as being weak. But even then, he's going to be handcuffed a lot into just playing his hand straightforwardly, because he will be out of position and he's got another player left behind him to think about. So even with that said, the chance that you might elicit some bluff raises with a small bet on the flop, I still think it's fine. And I'm going to come back to Captain Marb's stats here in a little bit, because I do want to address a comment that is made in the chat. And I will cover the ace-jack hand on table number 3 after this one wraps up. So the action plays out like this. Captain Marb check raises the flop, and PokerStud times down and eventually calls. I'm not a fan of the call for a couple of reasons. One is that we don't have enough of a read as to what our opponent is going to be doing on the turn when we call the check raise. We don't have enough of a read regarding how often they're check raise bluffing here. And at the same time, pocket sixes is a hand that is pretty much drawing dead when behind. And when it is the best hand, it's going to have to deal with the fact that your opponent is going to have a good amount of equity against you, and you're going to have to deal with what are going to be some pretty ugly board runouts. So, for example, the jack of clubs on the turn. Now, what do you do with pocket sixes? Are you happy to call down again for 30 big blinds? What do we do on the river when that card also runs off bad for our hand? So this is probably a spot where it's better to cut your losses early and just fold the flop.